Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, Friday afternoon edition. Final installment on the box tubing style bead roller that I started building last Saturday. I promised I would give an approximate estimate of what it costs, and I've determined you can build it yourself for right around $1,000. That includes the drive. If you want the optional table, I bought another Eastwood work table for $118, so you got to add that on there. So, hell, figure $1,200, and you have a machine very similar to one that cost nearly $7,000 without a work table. Are they the same? No. Are they very similar? Yeah. Some areas better, some areas worse. So let's go over a few highlights. In bead roller terminology, I got to go over it one more time. The smallest dies are 22 millimeter ID or 7/8. Those are 2-inch OD dies, and the gears have to run on a 2-inch center line. This style bead roller on Lazzy's site, the OD of the dies is the same, but his ID is 20 millimeter. Those are his and his alone, but they do run the shafts on a 2-inch center line. The 3/4 ID dies are 2.5-inch OD, like the Mittler Brothers and the big Eastwood and Bally and stuff like that. Bally, however you pronounce it. Those shafts run on a 2.5-inch center line, which opens up a lot of possibilities. And I might as well mention the third option is the high throat, which means the opening in the bead roller is 3 or 4 inches. It's made so if you already have a panel that's curved or has a feature that gets in the way, it'll still fit through the bead roller. Important if that's what you're dealing with. So focusing on the 22 millimeter bead rollers, where the axle shafts run on a 2-inch center line, doing the math, the bead roller math, there's always math involved. If they'd told me in high school how interesting math could be in problem solving for X, I would have paid attention. So on a 2-inch center line, you have 1-inch shafts. So in your center line, in between, half of each shaft is taking up 1 inch of your 2 inches that are available. The plate style bead rollers, where the shafts are mounted external on the plate, you can have a big opening, there's nothing in your way. On a box frame style bead roller, and to an extent the violin style that I built a couple weeks ago now, you have to subtract. I had 2 inches of a gap. I lost 1 inch to the shafts, and then I lost a little bit to the box tubing, even though I machined it down in the interior. I lost some to the block. I cut it as close as I dared to the top, but there's still a little bit of real estate taken up. And then the bushing itself, my bushings are 1/8 inch thick, so everything times 2. If you look at this style bead roller, the way they are built commercially, they really shave the box tubing, and I don't know what they must run a 1/16 bushing, and not much holding the bushing, because the shaft is almost even right here. Mine's close. Theirs is closer. So what does that mean? On that style bead roller you could buy that looks just like this, you have a 3/4 gap right here. I had done the math, and I knew that on the end where I had to cut out a section of the box tubing, I mean, my work area is pretty big until I start running a deep panel, and I only have slightly more than a 1/2 inch gap. So, I mean, you're only running, 18 gauge sheet metal or smaller in there, but if it gets curved or warped, the opening can become an issue. Knowing that, and the other one I built has a 3/4 gap, that is what I have to work with. Now, if you wanted to get around that, if you noticed, the blue bead roller that I sold back in February is a box tubing style bead roller, but they ran the shafts on top and below the box tubing, effectively making a high throat bead roller, but still running the 2.5 inch 3/4 ID dies. So that concept of that bead roller was pretty good, except the front block had 2 bolts to guide it, and it moves a little bit. Never be an issue, but if you had to pick fault with that style, and you don't see, that's the only one like that I've ever seen, and I'm feeling nostalgic. Maybe I should have hung on to it, but I know where it is. My buddy probably watched the video and feel good about the fact that he has a rare bead roller on his hands. That one was 24 inch throat, and again, it was a high throat without having the high throat dies, because the high throat dies are pretty much made by yourself or Mittler Brothers. So that's it about the opening in between. If this bead roller has a disappointment, that is it, and you can't fight math. So if you built this bead roller with 3/4 ID dies that are 2.5 inch OD, the OD of your die has to match the OD of your gears, and that, when you buy a 2.5 inch gear, it's gonna run, it's gonna run on a 2.5 inch center line. So the gears and the dies have to match, because otherwise the shafts are not going to function very well. When I finally got done with all my mock-up and it was time to start welding on the box tubing, I was a little bit nervous, because when I initially cut this section out of the bottom of the upper box, you can see it naturally curved like a banana while I was feeding it through the bandsaw. It was curving right away, and the actual front of the box tubing kind of flared out on its own. It doesn't affect anything, but that's how much stress this welded seam tubing was under. And I thought, but to myself, this could get interesting. So I carefully put the spacer in between the two box pieces of the box tubing to set my gear depth, and stripped all the shafts out of it, which only takes a second because I got them engineered a lot smoother than the other one. Knowing what I know now, if I could go back, I could do the same with the other one to make it easier to load the shafts in and out. And of course, these shafts are shorter, so I stripped it out, strapped it to the bench, carefully welded both sides of my spacer. I actually MIG welded the center of that so you can't see it. I mean, it came out nice anyway, but I was going to TIG weld everything else, which I did. And let it cool a little bit. I flopped it over a couple times, welded it completely, let it cool, and it was still dead nut straight, and I could grab and could not move the box tubing before I even reinforced it further. So I was impressed with the strength of the box tubing style roller already compared to the one made out of plate. Again, it's shorter. I can only imagine the ones that are for sale like this with only an 18 inch throat, they must be really sturdy, and he has a pretty substantial reinforcement on it, so that portion of it must be really strong. So then I had to think about how I was going to put reinforcement on it. I didn't want to interfere with my sliding shafts. If I did, I was going to have to cut more slots, and dealing with almost no flex, I just put some 1/4 inch plate, I believe, 3/16 plate on each side below where the shafts are going to ride, and on the other side there's an additional piece of metal to bolt the drive unit on. I took the Woodward Fab motor drive system off the Woodward Fab Super Bead that I sold, and while I haven't put a lot of hours on either one, I now have 2 of them. Before they went scarce, Eastwood, Woodward, they're all out of stock. So when the next shipment of them comes into port, we'll probably have some more available, this saying maybe the end of the month. I can't say enough good about the Woodward drive. I haven't had the Eastwood drive to try it, but you take the Woodward out of the box, the coupler and everything is tight on the motor, loose on the end that's going to slide on your shaft. It's literally take it out of the box. You got to wrangle all the cords and the foot control. You know, you don't want to drop it on the floor while you're messing with it, but you literally slide it onto the shaft and line up your bracket. I had to make a bracket, but it is that easy. I could have that drive off there in a couple minutes. And I was able to, once again, cut this much out of the safety shield, and that fit right back on. And in this case, I had to cut, that's probably 3/8 steel on the other side This interfered. This is the mount where the slotted holes are, where you mount the drive system on the side of the bead roller. This interfered with the other slot, the other adjuster slot. So having this adjustable upper shaft feature was a lot of work. Again, I haven't even used it enough to know if I'll even ever use that feature. I might become an artist and learn how to run it. This whole operation was more just, I saw it, I had most of the stuff here. I said, you know what, I'm gonna build one of those too. It's fun, it's really rewarding. And start to finish, solving problems every day, having things come out nice, that's always going to be fun. About a month ago, I had ended up with 2 of the Woodward Fab bead roller stands, and it's okay. I'm fine with the tree and all the little studs and everything, that's fine. How it mounts is fine. The X on the bottom, or one, I had 2 of them shipped here and they're both hanging out of the box when they got here. Everything else from Woodward Fab was packed with 1,000 pounds of foam. This is just thrown in a cardboard box and it's all beat to hell when he gets here. And the hardware package ripped open and all your bolts are missing. And this X on the bottom, if they sold a wheel that bolted on there, I haven't really found any commercial available wheel that would bolt on there, those 2 holes that are available, and be useful. So I haven't shopped every wheel known to man, but common stuff that's reasonably priced is not going to bolt on there. So I was thinking about making adapters, and by the time I figured out the material needed to make the adapters, outside drying in the sun, painted a beautiful gloss almond, which is a pretty good match. I found that at the hardware store. I just built an X out of 2x3 tubing, mounted the wheels just like I mounted on the other bead roller, and using the outer 2 holes on each stand. Originally I was going to take those cross pieces off and affix my rig to it. And then I just determined I'm going to set the whole thing on my X and bolt it on just like that. So why not? So it's going to be about the height it's at now, which I like. And having that stand hanging around and building a new one really didn't make any sense. So that's what I got. A quick walk around. You can see I've shaved the tubing and I'm pretty well, I got the width of this collar. I could go higher. I mean, I gave up space for sure. But like I said, I was maximum going to gain 1/4 inch in the throat. If it's a problem, I'll build a high throat. This little dog bone piece my buddy had under his plasma table when I was picking up the pieces for the other bead roller. And he gave it to me and I kind of ground it up. You see I welded it on there. This piece here I had from something else. It actually works really nice. Not the prettiest rig, but that's okay. The further back you get, the better it looks. The spring worked out flawless. Is a little internal spring too, so there's a spring inside a spring. Everything slides really nice. These handles are really nice. They have some cheaper plastic ones, and these are all metal with a plastic knob. And that worked out really good. The spacing material was left over from the Eastwood table that I put on the other bead roller. Let's go, oops, sorry, tripping over stuff. Internal shot, you can see my grease fitting, which I can access down through the hole with a needle. I haven't tightened this bolt yet because I'm going to attach the second Eastwood work table that I bought the other day. $118 shipped, you really can't beat it. And this is where I had to cut out for the adjuster. And I just made a block and welded it in there. TIG welded everything. Out here in the wind is my X downside where the wheels are going to bolt on. I got to flip it over, paint the other half as soon as I stop jabbing on the phone here. Before I installed the safety shield, just like I did with the other bead roller, I used some of this wedge brake lubricant. I look like a supermodel, I'm sure, showing off my product. Big trucks, air brakes in the 70s and 80s. There was a horrid contraption known as the wedge brake, where the air can shoved a wedge in and pushed the shoes out. Kind of worked like a Lenko when you shifted it, shoved a wedge in and spread something out. While that is a horrific design, the grease, the wedge brake lubricant, is made to not turn to oil when it gets really hot. So I spread it on the gears on both the bead rollers, and I use it. I don't have much of it. You could buy more, I suppose, but I had it left over from a long time ago. My thought process is on a 100-degree day, I'm not going to look in the safety shield and have oil dripping out of it when the grease, like if I put wheel bearing grease in there, it's going to turn to liquid when it gets around 100 degrees or less. So I'm hoping this just sticks to the gears and stays where it belongs. The Woodward Fab Super Bead had regular grease on it, and that was dropping out all the time, even when it was running. This stuff seems to cling on pretty good. So that's that. So again, next time you see it, it will have a Woodward Fab, excuse me, I get them mixed up occasionally, Eastwood Fab work table, $118 shipped, you can't beat it. That comes with most of the hardware I can use, and I just don't think I can so buy all the materials and spend a day building it and be ahead of the game, whereas they typically sell for $150 or $60, lately $118 shipped, and that's from Eastwood on eBay. So if you're looking for one, that's the place to get one. All right, that's it. No more bead roller talk. Next time we're going to talk about something different. So thanks for following along on the journey. All 3 or 4 of you that have watched all the videos. And YouTube's mad at me. They think I'm tanking hard because the viewership's gone down because turbo LS dots and bead rollers are not the most popular thing. But hey, it's a journey. And that's just the way it is. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you in a couple days.